Another issue is the East Timor. Indonesia, Southeast Asia was envisaged as regional organization. ASEAN was envisaged as a regional organization of 10 countries. Because in Southeast Asia, in 1967, there were only 10 countries. But then in year 2000, one new member came up, which is Timor-Leste. It came after a referendum that was done, and it separated from Indonesia and became an independent state. Now, Indonesia, the last country that you would expect to support Timor-Leste's joining ASEAN would be Indonesia, given the fact that we have a difficult history with Timor-Leste, to say the least. I'm just being very diplomatic here. But the fact is, remarkably, Indonesia now is the strongest supporter of Timor-Leste joining ASEAN. We're the #1 proponent of it. We keep pushing this. And there's still some disagreement within ASEAN on this issue, but we're quite adamant on this because we think the regional architecture is not complete unless Timor-Leste, as the only country outside ASEAN, remains outside ASEAN. So they should join. And if the argument is Timor-Leste is too small, hey, Brunei is much smaller. Brunei is, what is it, 250,000 if I'm not mistaken. Timor-Leste is over 1 million people, right? But the point is, cannot happen an enduring and coherent regional architecture unless everybody's in it. And that last everybody is Timor-Leste. Thai-Cambodia dispute is also a matter of active dispute. One thing that Cambodia has said upon assuming the chairmanship was that they wanted Indonesia to continue their role in the Thai-Cambodia conflict. And the new Thai Prime Minister, Prime Minister Djalal, also concurs with that. I read. I had the good fortune to be part in these meetings in Bali. The relationship between Thailand and Cambodia, especially the personal relationship between the two prime ministers, the Prime Minister of Cambodia and Prime Minister of Thailand, had significantly improved. And this is why both of them were comfortable. And when they were asked why, ASEAN, as chairman of Cambodia, would still prefer Indonesia to play a role. And the answer was, look, we don't want any conflict of interest. You know, we can't be chairman of ASEAN and mediate our own conflict. So we want Indonesia to continue with this, and we welcome this. And I think we have enough expertise and enough knowledge and sensitivity about the issue to continue to play a fair, disinterested role in the Thai-Cambodia conflict. And at the East Asia Summit, Indonesia's approach was that, yes, we have these 6 issues that we wanted East Asia Summit to focus on, issues such as finance, environment. I'm getting old, I forget the other ones, but Indonesia says these issues are all great issues, we should continue to advance them, but these issues are not exhaustive. After 6 years of East Asia Summit, it's time for us to broaden these issues, not to just focus on these 6 issues, but to tackle on greater issues. So that's what happened in Bali. And I should say that we're quite happy with the U.S. participation there. The result of the U.S.-ASEAN Summit was quite beefy, substantive, and reflected progress in the U.S.-ASEAN relationship. And also America's participation sort of became a high point of enhanced engagement with Southeast Asia that was done by President Barack Obama. You know, there were a number of things, policy shifts that were done by Washington in terms of its engagement in Southeast Asia. One was the fact that U.S.-ASEAN Summit was to become an annual thing. It wasn't before. This means that America would meet with ASEAN, including Myanmar in it, and this was to be done on an annual basis at the highest level. Secondly, America signed on to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. We had encouraged America for so long to sign on to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, and many others had done so. Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, and so on and so on and so on. And for some reason, I think the lawyers in the U.S. government were concerned about many things or some things, but only under the administration of President Barack Obama, they said, let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. Let's sign the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, and then join the East Asia Summit. And in America's engagement with Myanmar had also changed. More engagement, right? And you can see it, the fruits of it with the visit of Secretary Clinton to Myanmar right after the East Asia Summit, which was the first time, I think, in I don't know how long time that American Secretary of State had visited Myanmar. So we see in Southeast Asia a very active and rich, enhanced engagement of America in the Southeast Asia region. And I think President Barack Obama's participation at the East Asia Summit, the fact that he came there despite the hectic political agenda at home, and the fact that he came not just to, he knew, he listened enough and he talked enough. There was a good balance in how, everybody's watching America, would they become too overbearing? Would they, as a first-time player, or how would they conduct a first-time participation? There was a lot of that, and I must compliment the president for doing a really good job in combining balance between the need to listen and also the need to shape the agenda and move the East Asia forward in a ways that kept the comfort level high with the other leaders taking part in East Asia. So what are the lessons learned? I see my good friend, Ambassador Heng, who is now shouldering the headache, and I will happily send you a lot of aspirins to your office. But maybe from what, and again, this is not an official lessons learned, this is a personal take, but I hope some of these would be useful for you. First, if you are going to host the East Asia Summit and chair ASEAN, get the dates as early as possible. Get the dates as early as possible. Why? Because you are looking at a very hectic diplomatic agenda, and there are some countries which decide on summits, believe it or not, 2 months before it actually happens, right? And there are some countries like Australia or America that decides these things a year before. They block the agenda a year before. So different diplomatic, bureaucratic way of doing things. But my advice is get the dates as early as possible, because somebody's going to block the dates for G20. Somebody's going to block the dates for APEC. And you need to block the dates for East Asia Summit. And if you are the last to block these dates, you're going to have a lot of trouble, because many of the leaders have political considerations about leaving the country more than 2 weeks, right? Even 1 week is too long for some leaders. And to actually travel 3 continents, 12 time zones, to attend 3 major international meetings, that's a lot. So I think you need to know who's going to host G20, who's going to host APEC, and negotiate the dates. There was a lot of this with the U.S. administration, I'll tell you, and also with the others, with China and the others, to make sure that we get the right dates. Secondly, leadership is important. If you ask me what is the most important thing as we held the East Asia Summit and the ASEAN Summit in Bali, is the fact that my president and foreign minister really spent a lot of time on this. A lot of time was spent on preparing the details. My president read every talking points, and he made sure that whenever there was a meeting with America or China, he is briefed about all the nuances. He didn't want just to understand the talking points, but he wants to know the background and the nuances. And if he can't say a certain thing, he wants to be explained why I can't say this, right? So there was this obsession, both at the highest level and ministerial level, that made our participation quite strong. I just, as a way of example, my president carried in his pocket a small book, and in that book contains the CV and intimate details about the leaders that were taking part in ASEAN and East Asia Summit. For example, President A, there would be information, or his daughter had just married somebody, and his dog's name is Poo-Poo or whatever, and then he would be able to go to, hey, your daughter got married, and how's Poo-Poo? How do you know about that? But that level of detail and intense engagement is critical. I say this because when you deal with East Asia Summit and ASEAN Summit, if you leave it to just the bureaucracies, if you just leave it to the first echelon, the director generals, it's going to fail. They don't have the political mandate, many of them, or some of them don't have the creativity, some of them don't have the tradition, the ability to think outside the box, and many of the decisions and the directions that you need would need to be politically made. And having the highest level attention on this and full attention is absolutely critical to the success of ASEAN and East Asia Summit. Now, it is also important in terms of leadership, choose your priorities. When we look at what we wanted to do with ASEAN, we came up with a very confusing landscape of regional organization. There were so many issues at so many levels, so many declarations. We got lost. I'm not talking about dozens. I'm talking about dozens, many issues. And it became clear that we don't have the capacity to push all these issues all at once. And we need to choose which ones were important and practicable, right? Which ones we actually have the resources and have the highest chance of some kind of diplomatic consensus. So, we chose ASEAN connectivity, the rice reserve issue, the ASEAN power grid, ASEAN humanitarian disaster center, counterterrorism, and a few others. And we just limited to those things. And I think this is important for Cambodia because I think, like Indonesia, you don't have the, the bureaucratic capacity to handle all the big issues. And many of them would be handled by the ASEAN Secretariat anyways, but choose your priorities and start from there. And the third lesson is knowing when to push. The South China Sea Declaration of Conduct is an example of it. People just became used to the narrative, to the conversation, and nobody bothered pushing the issue towards an actual resolution. And this is what we did with Declaration of Conduct. We saw that it's been going on for too long, for 10 years, and we felt if we push this, we have more than 50-50 chance to succeed, right? Just because we just felt the dynamics of it. And we pushed it, we knew when to push, we pushed the button, and it happened in July. We finalized the Declaration of Conduct. So this art, again, there's no manual that will teach you which issues to push, but this will require a great deal of diplomatic instinct on the part of the leadership on deciding when to push and which issue to push. Fourth lesson is ASEAN cohesion will always be tested now. Regional architecture is, regional diplomacy is very different now. It's a very crowded place. All the players want a piece of the action, and there's power shifts whereby we have rising powers such as China, India, and others, South Korea, ASEAN, Indonesia. They all are becoming assertive, and they all want to say that, look, if something happens, we want to be part of it. We want to be part of the solution. And this is also a place whereby the major powers are becoming more engaged with the region. I told you earlier, you all know about America's re-engagement with Asia Pacific. And we really felt, throughout the year, that as chairman of ASEAN, one of the biggest challenges is dealing with the two giants, which is America and China. America's participation in the East Asia Summit changed the weight of East Asia Summit in a sense that U.S.-China relationship would now factor in to the East Asia Summit dynamics, right? And we really felt it, and Indonesia is a middle power, we 240 million people, our economy is almost $1 trillion, so on and so on. And the ability to deal with the two giants, America and China, which want different things sometimes, It's really an art by itself, and I think something that Indonesia learned a lot from how to handle it, and I think something that Cambodia will also need to develop that art, because believe me, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen quite a lot. And ASEAN cohesion will be tested, and I think this is a time for ASEAN to be flexible, to be pragmatic, and also knowing when to be firm. You know, how many Southeast Asians we have here? Yeah. Let me see, can I get some hands? There you go. You know about Southeast Asians. We just love everybody. And we just love to be loved. And we don't like to fight. We don't like to ruffle feathers, right? I like to avoid conflict. If you say nasty things to me and we'll say, thank you very much, right? That's Southeast Asians, right? And what I want to say is, I think if you want to be a good leader in ASEAN, given the changing nature of regional diplomacy, ruffling a few feathers would be unavoidable. There are issues that ASEAN need to be firm and push back when we need to. And there are issues where ASEAN cohesion need to be maintained. Again, it's probably not wholly part of the ASEAN mindset or cultural disposition, but I think we got to get used to more of that. And I like to say that ASEAN used to think diplomacy as volleyball. Nice game, you throw the ball, and then it's a non-contact sport. But I think what happens in Bali shows that sometimes it's not volleyball, sometimes it's rugby. You really push back and be pushed back, and it's part of the game. It's just part of the game, and it's part of how to get things done in the region now. The other lesson is, even within the context of the ASEAN way, there are always new boundaries to push, right? Now, one example is the Thai-Cambodia conflict. When it happened, everyone in ASEAN said, hands off. We don't want to get into this. This is just between Thai and Cambodia. But then at some point we said, can ASEAN be relevant? Can ASEAN say that we are masters of our regional affairs? If something happens between our brothers and nothing is said, nothing is done, or nothing is attempted to be done, there was some opening, some opportunity, and Indonesia, with goodwill, as an honest broker, tried to do our part to help. If this had been done, if this was in the 70s or 80s, it wouldn't happen. Even in the 90s, it would not happen. But we felt that within the ASEAN way, you could still push some boundaries. And I think this is what's interesting in the years ahead of how ASEAN evolves, which is what other boundaries that you can push, right? Because the moment ASEAN believes that ASEAN way cannot be changed, that ASEAN in 2012 must be no different than ASEAN in 1967, then ASEAN becomes stale and stagnant and unresponsive to regional and global development. So the lessons learned is knowing which boundaries can be pushed by maintaining the ASEAN way. And the two last ones, it's very important for America to sign on to ratify the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. It's very important. For us, this is very important in Indonesia because we negotiated this for about 30 years with America to sign on to negotiate the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. We gave a lot of concessions for that America would be part of the International Convention on the Law of the Sea, both for strategic use, for economic use, and so on and so on. We gave a lot of concessions, and only to make sure that America is part of it. America signed on to it, but until now haven't ratified it. And I know this is an ongoing issue. Various American administrations have tried to push this through. The Pentagon is practically using the Convention on Law of the Sea as their manual, operational manual for their ships and so on, for their naval engagements and so on. But the fact is the Senate has not ratified it. And what I want to say is that what happens in Bali, America talked quite a lot about the need to respect international law, especially with regard to the South China Sea issue, right? And the more America underscores the importance of international maritime law in the region, the more you will be reminded of the need to ratify this convention, because otherwise there will be a big void. On one hand, you pushing this, everybody to respect maritime law. On the other hand, you're not signing up, right? So there was this gap that needs to be closed. And the final lesson, security. You know, I took part in the G20 summit in Nice, in France. And I tell you, when I went there, Nice was really, what do you call it, barricaded? What is it? Barricaded, you know, it's like a big jail, you know, seriously, very tight security. And I think most of the summits that I went to, including in Hawaii, if you went to Hawaii at the APEC summit, you see high fences that barricaded the whole section where the summit took place. And it's sort of accepted among all the people who take part in the summit, all the leaders, all the delegations, that this has to be this way. Because, hey, you know, it's the post 9/11 era, right? So it has to be like that. But we are so proud of the fact that when you went to Bali, when the leaders went to Bali, no barricades, right? We went to an island, not an island, what do you call it? A short peninsula called Nusa Dua. I'm sure you've been there many times. And President Barack Obama was just walking all over the place, trying different cookbooks and stopping by and taking off his jacket, sitting down, discussing this and that, and going between hotels and blah, blah. You don't see a heavy security presence in Bali. I've never seen anything like that. To be honest, I was expecting something a lot worse, right? But in Bali, you hardly saw the security. You saw security, of course, but you don't see the barricades. And movement within the Nusa Dua area, which is a small peninsula, quite a large area, was relatively free. You know, I could go from the convention hall to my hotel back and forth without any problem, and so did everybody else. So I think one of the things that Secret Service complimented us on this was, how did you do this? You know, how did Indonesia do this? Everyone was so relaxed. Security was tight, but you don't really see it being overdone. And I think, again, I think this was good for me because, you know, when you take part in diplomatic summits, you know, it can affect your mind when things become so, what do you call it, so close and so tight. And it's nice to be back to an era or a time or a situation where our leaders can meet. Everything's congenial, everything's relaxed, but you still have good discussions, but without the feeling of overburdened security. So these are my update on you on what we did as ASEAN chairman, and also as host of the East Asia Summit in Bali, and some of the lessons learned. I'm sorry if I took too long to speak, but I hope it's useful to you. Thank you.